Sensative, and welcome everyone, and welcome Matt Petterson with us.
Thank you.
And at Sensative AB, I think you were working for many years in the telecom and IT industry, and you are a proud co-founder and CEO of Sensative AB, I guess.
Very much so. Thank you.
And I don't want to go about much detail on Sensative, rather than I leave you the floor to provide valuable information for the audience that are following us. And welcome.
Thank you. Very happy to be here. I must admit I spent a couple of hours during the weekend to look at Tim from Helium and got quite inspired. So clearly, I think you have some good things coming in this channel. Anyhow, let me try to share. But maybe before that, I should try to give a little bit background about myself. So exactly as you mentioned, Francis, I'm the CEO of Sensative, and Sensative was founded 2013. Prior to that, I worked with mobile phones in Sony Mobile. Before that, Sony Ericsson, and even started already in 1987 developing mobile phones for Ericsson. However, I made a journey the last couple of years in Sony Mobile, where we went from developing mobile phones totally on our own, very integrated devices. I think you remember them. They had buttons. I think you remember. And then we started to collaborate with Nokia, and we developed Symbian, Series 60 Symbian and UIQ Symbian, and tried to establish an app market and things like this. However, we got competition from Apple first, and I think everyone remembers Apple, the iPhone 1, and yeah, everyone looked at iPhone 1 with different eyes. Too many people, I think, in telecom looked at it and said, "Oh, okay, they don't do MMS, they don't do this." I think lesson learned. We should have been paying a little bit more attention to that. However, next thing that happened was Google and Android, and Google and Android became then the operating system for smartphones.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of recreated the market, because with Android, we also got to see an app market and a complete ecosystem with the operating system, with the whole world developing applications for mobile phones, and the availability for Sony and for Samsung and everyone else to start utilizing this operating system rather than trying to do everything on our own. And that was a very huge change in the market. And basically everyone had to just follow this huge tsunami of change that was introduced by Google and Android in the market. And that created a world of developers developing apps for mobile phones, and there was no chance at all for a company even like Sony or Nokia to compete with that. We had to adopt. Then I left the company 2012, joined Sensative in 2013 as CEO and a late founder or late co-founder of Sensative. And I brought with me all the experience and all the lessons learned from Sony into that. And one thing I've learned was the power of this transformation from us doing integrated development of mobile phones and doing everything over into the very horizontal business model that came with Android, and the strength of a middleware as Android for mobile phones. and the incredible power in the crowd developing applications for mobile phones. And all that lessons learned we brought into Sensative and try to figure out how should we now work with IoT and how can we combine the experience that we had from Android and mobile phones into the IoT. And that's basically where we started Sensative. So let's see if this now works to share.
Yes.
Mats Petterson joined.
Yes, now we can see your slides.
So we started developing, actually we didn't start developing our platform. We started to develop sensors in 2013. But quite quickly we were approached by business angels, by business coaches, by startup coaches and so forth. And everyone asked us about our app for our sensors. And basically trying to push us into delivering the sensor as a service in a very vertical setup. At the same time, with the experience of the tsunami power of a horizontal setup, we started instead to try to investigate and see, okay, when will this change from vertical silo functions over to a horizontal setup for smart buildings and smart city? When will that happen? Who is working with this question? We actually found out that there wasn't anyone really working with that at the time. So we decided to start up our own development. And that development is basically based upon this vision, a collaborative smart society where data is really, really coming to use, where different shareholders in the city, whether you are a car company, an enterprise, school, real estate company, a city function or whatever, everyone should be able to collaborate using data. And there should be a service marketplace similar to what you had in Android, with loads of developers developing services or applications for the smart society or the smart city. And if multiple smart cities have the same APIs and the same data models exactly as on Android basically standardized the API in a smartphone. If we could do the same thing, if we could standardize not the different platforms, but standardize the API, standardize the data models, then it should be very easy to share data, but it should also be very easy to start having application developers developing apps for Stockholm, for example, and then when that is done, they offer the same app to Gothenburg and to Malmö and Hamburg and New York and so forth. And that's really our vision in this. We discussed earlier a little bit, me and Francis, about Helium. Helium had this vision to democratizing. That's a hard word to say.
It's more hard, like democratic itself.
To make IoT more democratic by having a network that can be shared by many. We are trying to make this more democratic as well, but not towards consumers, but rather towards property owners, like the city itself, like the real estate company and so forth. Give them the power or to empower them to really start benefiting from digitalization and start adding services, becoming data-driven and so forth. Because the current situation for a city looks like this. It's not a city where you actually use data in between. It's not where you share data. It's a city where you have a number of different functions, and all those different functions are connected. Smart dustbins, smart parking spaces, real buildings that are connected through the heating system, the ventilation system, things like this. But it's done function by function. And the data is owned by the service provider, and he keeps it for his own usage in his own format and so forth, not really collaborating with other vendors here. And even worse, there's no possibility really for a real estate company to collaborate with the city itself or with the parking spot owner and so forth. So it's not a collaborative smart city at all. It's a smart city based upon loads of different automated functions.
But Mats, in the beginning, you mentioned you were slowly moving from vertical to horizontal setup. So what do you mean by like in the context of smart city? So what do you mean by going from vertical setup to horizontal setup?
So this picture is what I see as a vertical setup, because the city itself has outsourced a specific function. Let's talk about parking spots, for example. They outsourced the digital solution for smart parking spots to a service provider, and he puts in the sensors, the gateways, the back end, and the front end. So it's a complete end-to-end service. But this end-to-end service is, as I say, a single service. It's not talking to other services. It's the parking sensors cannot be utilized by others. In this kind of situation, you have parking sensors, and they go to a specific, as I say, middleware. If you look at this city, you can see that the city is based on an Android phone, right?
Yeah.
So in a horizontal setup, that would mean that all the different sensors in a city would be connected to a single middleware system where there is an API and a standardized data model, and the city controls who get access to those devices. Basically meaning that you can have a multiple service provider, multiple users utilizing the parking spot sensors. I come back to that, so I think it will be clear. Anyhow, you have a very similar situation for buildings or in the real estate domain. Everyone has learned a lesson that you should try to manage your core business and outsource everything else to specialist companies. And that has been the only way to do things the last 20-25 years when it comes to digitalization. But that also created houses where digitalization is now fragmented. You have a specific provider doing heating and ventilation system. You have one that is doing the access system, the door locks and so forth. You have one provider for alarm systems. You have one provider for smart laundry and so forth. The fact is now then, the more you digitalize and the more you start to have dedicated digital functions, the more you need to have hardware that is basically duplicated, because you might have 10 different smart services, all requiring to know the temperature in all rooms in the buildings. And of course, it's pretty stupid to have 10 temperature sensors instead of one, which 10 different service providers can utilize. McKinsey did a study and a report a couple of years ago where they basically claimed that due to the fragmentation and due to the poor compatibility between different data and different sensors, more than 40% of the potential value in IT were lost due to this fragmentation. So what do real estate companies do? Well, they try to solve that by basically requesting from service providers to open up an API and then try to connect all those different services through integration platforms so that can import and export data in between. But it becomes, as you can see in this picture, a little bit of spaghetti mess, because every building, every real estate company basically need to do his own integration setup and try to translate data from different proprietary data formats. So it becomes messy. Once you have a building up and running and it works, you try to let it be, not change things at work. So is there a different way? Yes, of course. That's what we are trying to do. And we have been building our platform for a while, and we haven't had a good name for it. But we're now trying to introduce a new platform type that we call a DIMS. Everyone in the real estate business knows what a building management system is, a BMS. If you work with video or video cameras, you know what a VMS, video management system, or if you work with lights, you know a light management system. All of those softwares are used to manage a specific function. DIMS that we are introducing now, we call it Digitalization Infrastructure Management System. The intention is not to manage a specific function like lights or buildings or something. The meaning with the DIMS is to manage the sensors, the actuators, the digitalization infrastructure that you have in a building, that you have in a city, that you have when connecting lights, and manage those things. And providing an API, a standardized API, so that you can have a BMS or LMS or whatever connecting through a DIMS to the actual light system or to the actual building. And this is now then the middleware that I was talking about before that corresponds to Android for a mobile phone. But this middleware is then to be the man in the middle to connect to a digital city or a digital building. So once we have this up and running, we basically create a single system for, let's say in this case, a building or a real estate company, where all sensors, actuators are connected, where all the data is stored, and where the actual value is then done by apps that is connected through this API. So it's if you look at that and forget about the difference between the mobile phone and the building, it's basically doing exactly the same thing as Android is.
Mm-hmm. No, I was also going to ask a similar question that people already asked on Discord. So you showed a spaghetti setup connecting different sensors or services in the previous slide, but then I think there are two issues that might come up. One is, of course, the security. So that I guess your DIMS platform handles well. And then there was another concern. It's not a question or comment. It was raised that the sharing the data when you are acting at the horizontal setup, that different companies might not want to share the data because of marketing competition and so on, right?
Yeah, completely agree. So first, addressing security, or even more important, maybe privacy or integrity issues in this setup. GDPR is clearly something that we need to be aware of. And all those service providers here in these pictures manage GDPR, I'm sure. But what happens when the real estate company try to integrate using an integration platform like this is that it combines data from multiple different service providers in a way that the real estate company actually takes over the responsibility for GDPR based upon the combination of data from different service providers. And that could be troublesome. Similar, all those integrations, since they are done in using APIs that are sometimes not intended to be managed. So that it's a hack rather than a managed API. It does actually open up for security holes, especially since this is not really a standard integration. Every building has its own set of integrations. So yes, this is a concern when you try to integrate like this, both data integrity and GDPR as well as cybersecurity. The second question was what?
Data sharing between
Data sharing, thank you. And we'll jump to this one. So with the DIMS becomes a tool of the property owner. And the property owner then uses this tool to manage all the devices and manage the data. And one of the benefits that we give the property owner with our DIMS is that he can then define how to share his data. Very similar to how you define how you share files or libraries in Google Drive, for example. So you can share, first of all, everything is private as long as you want it to be private. So no one else can see any device or any data unless you have started to share this with others. When you share, you can share read access, you can share write access, you can share just the possibility to see that there is a device, but you don't share the actual data. And you can also share the rights to configure a device. And this you can share on an individual level per sensor or per group of sensors, and you can share it with individual users or group of users or specific service providers. So basically, this becomes a tool for the real estate company to really take ownership of exactly how you manage your data.
That means your end consumers are not individuals, it's more real estate companies and property owners, and it can be in even the governmental agencies, right?
Exactly. Thanks for pointing that out. Our customers are not consumers. Our customers are typically different types of property owners. Whether that is then a factory or a real estate company or a city, farmers, so forth, that doesn't really matter, but it's someone that has a rather large stock of properties and would like to digitalize them. But however, some of those real estate companies, of course, have, as I say, houses with apartments or buildings with apartments, and they have tenants. So the next step then could be for him to start offering smart apartment services to his tenants, which he can do, and then he can take ownership of defining exactly who has access to what data. The apartment owner only, or the real estate company might also have access to some of the data and so forth. But this is really a contract between the real estate company and the tenant.
But that's nothing to do with DIMS platform or DIMS management system, like how this contract will be handled digitally.
Exactly. So the DIMS platform enables for the real estate company to make this and to share data or restrict who has access to the data. But how he does that is based upon a contract between the real estate company and each tenant, or standard contract, of course, with the tenants.
Yeah, okay.
From the real estate company point of view, the benefit, of course, is also that typically all buildings have different suppliers of different functions, heating, ventilation, blah, blah, blah. Connecting all of that to a standardized platform, DIMS platform like our Ugu, means that the real estate company will have a consistent environment to work in. So instead of having to deal with different softwares in different buildings, he can now connect everything to our middleware and get control of the devices, and then he connects 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 or whatever services that he would like to use for different services and apply them for all his buildings. So moving from a very fragmented portfolio of buildings with different services to instead having a set of services that you apply on all buildings. And also, if you remember the collaborative city that we talked about in the beginning, the intention now is that the real estate company should be able to share data not only with his own employees and his own tenants, but also start sharing some relevant data with the city and using some relevant data from the city when doing his own buildings a little bit smarter. But working with this, it really becomes a collaborative city with different actors really collaborative in a digital way. And with vehicles becoming autonomous and so forth, it's really key that we can share data in a good manner between systems. That also brings me to the digital evolution. And so far we have been, well, we started with dumb buildings and dumb cities, and we started to apply automation to both buildings and cities. And the last 15-20 years we have been connecting those automated services to the cloud, and basically we have now remote controlled automated services. But it's really the fourth step that makes the society smart. And this is again the collaborative smart city, where you have systems of systems all being able to connect with each other and take actions pretty much on their own, machine to machine. This is not data from machine to machine. This is two different machines actually being able to communicate with each other and take actions, like a car without a person, without a driver, comes to the parking lot and being let in and being advised on a specific parking space and being connected to the charging pump. You need to have digital services actually communicating with each other. So let's look into what Yggo is then, which we claim is the world's first DIMS platform, or at least since we invented the term DIMS, we're definitely the first. The whole intention is that you should have a single common platform to connect all your digital things. And once you have connected all those things, whether it's IoT things or legacy systems or just external data sources, you provide a single API and standardized data models. We also in Sensative decided that we should not try to invent our own API or invent our own data models. So instead we found quite a large European open source community named Fireware. And I think it's interesting for everyone to take a look at Fireware if you haven't done that already. It's a quite large open source community with different software blocks, generic enablers, and also defining both API and data models for a smart society. Then the whole point is now to move the ownership of data and ownership of managing devices from the service provider and to the property owner, who we believe is the legit owner of data and things, so that he can take take the ownership and the responsibility of being the provider of the digital infrastructure in his own building. With our platform, we have something that we call a control panel, a DIMS control panel or Yggo control panel. This is a web application so that you can start to manage all your things, all your data, and start sharing access to those things. And more importantly, is an ecosystem that is being developed right now with a number of third-party service providers that can then connect their service to our platform and start delivering value for employees of the company, to customers, to tenants, to citizens, partners, and whatever. You might wonder if there is any competitive solution. I think I started saying that one of the main reasons for this change is that you need to take ownership. A property owner needs to take ownership of data in order to really utilize the data and become data-driven. And there are different ways to do that. Every property owner today has outsourced to different vertical system providers. And that is what has created the problem. This is the second one here, vertical systems, because that means a digital fragmentation. One way to solve this would be instead to go with one or two of those vertical system providers and say, okay, could you do everything for me? So instead of having 20 or 100 different vertical services, you have only one, but that one is delivering the whole digital experience. So this is one possibility to go. The drawback, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear about what do you mean by provider and what do you mean by supplier in this case?
Sorry, I would say that's basically the same thing, provider or supplier.
Okay, because we have a question regarding supplier. So I guess this is also relates to the provider, is that let's say a real estate owner wants to replace a supplier. And in this case, obviously, you have some pre-installed sensors, and sensors most of the time have some dependencies. So how do you handle this if there is a dependency and a new supplier comes in and he wants to use some of the existing sensors?
So totally true. Most hardware in the buildings today are hard connected to a service provider. In some cases, we are lucky because there is an interface, an open interface that we can connect to. In some cases, it's just hard connected and we cannot do anything. Okay. Once it's connected though to a system like Yggo, it's very easy to replace a sensor with another brand, since we have a common data model. So for a new sensor, we add a new device driver, and then it will be directly connected to the same data model as we used with the old one, which means all the services are still compliant.
Because you are by default following the 5-wire standards.
Yes. So that would be very similar to if you, for example, you have your computer and you replace your Wi-Fi module, for example, with another brand of Wi-Fi module. It still works because you add the new Wi-Fi driver for the new components. Anyway, the other possibility for property owners is to instead work with one of the large IoT platforms like Amazon's AWS or Microsoft's Azure. And those are extremely capable platforms, but they're not a complete product. They're meant to be a good base for developing digital services. Using those platforms.
They have more on big data.
Yeah. So we see some real estate companies, some utility companies that are building up their own development team and utilizing AWS or Azure, and then doing their own thing. But then it becomes their proprietary solution, so to say. And those are our competitors, basically. We compete with all those 3 different solutions. We claim that with a horizontal solution, you can pretty much both eat the cookie and still have the cookie left, because with the the middleware connecting all the devices and all the data, you get a coherent infrastructure of things, and you can still have a very competitive market of service providers. While in the other solutions, you have a competitiveness between vertical systems in the traditional setup. But if you work with a CSP, that CSP becomes your monopolist. If you choose Azure, for example, then you have to go with Azure for the rest. If you select an all-in-one supplier, you're stuck with that all-in-one supplier. It's very difficult to move. If you go with the horizontal setup with Uggio, to some extent, you need to have a DIMS platform, but you can even replace the DIMS platform because of standardized API and standardized data models. And the services and the devices are much more easy to replace if they do not fulfill the requirements moving forward. So
there was a comment on also about data. I mean, I just popped up for you so that you can read yourself and make your comments on that. So can you read the comment on the screen?
Should I read the comment right now?
No, I'm just sharing the comment. So it says maybe the data could be sold prepared, not the raw data or the algorithm themselves, more like a generic value to measure some event or action.
Yes.
But the raw data and the algorithms can be hidden. That was the comment.
Yes, that's exactly what we are doing with our platform Uggio. So that translates raw data into a standardized data model. Mm-hmm. And that's the benefit, because then you can replace a temperature sensor with another temperature sensor. But the service can just continue and run because it doesn't even notice that you changed the brand of the temperature sensor.
Mm-hmm. So basically, you are transforming data to some value-oriented resources.
We are transforming raw data in a proprietary format into a standardized data model on a higher level, and on top of that, we also allow the real estate company, the owner of the sensor, to add metadata, which means that you have more information. If you are going to share this data with others, the metadata will help you to put the temperature into, into its environment, because you know where it's placed. You know, you will get all the information about.
Okay.
About the sensor as well, not only about the actual temperature.
Mm-hmm.
The context of it. Just a little bit about our platforms. Our platform is not built upon one of the big IT platforms. It's built upon a number of open source components. Those are the blue and the purple blocks here. And then there is a number of boxes that are developed by Sensative. It's the green ones. And the gray boxes here symbolizes a lot of services from third-party providers. The benefit of this is that we're using microservices and also Kubernetes. And the combination of that is that we can execute the software in basically anywhere. It can be run on Amazon, it can be run on Microsoft, it can be run on any of the cloud providers. Typically, sometimes we work with City Networks, which is a Swedish cloud provider. And some of our customers run it on-prem in its own data service. You can actually even run it on a small device like a Raspberry Pi. If you then look at the platform more from a functional point of view, the core function of the platform is a data broker, which is compliant to the FireWire standard. And a data broker is basically the one that you configure, and then it ensures that data goes only to the users that have access to that data. And it's only the users that can access a specific device that can connect to a broker to an actuator and, for example, lock up a door or something like this. We have a built-in rule engine. It's similar to IFTTT, if this then that. So a lot of logical rules that you can program to define, for example, what happens if the temperature goes above 30 degrees, or what happens when you push the button, or what happens when the sun goes down. And we have also included and integrated AI and ML frameworks so that we can enhance the logical rules quite a lot and having a lot more, much more fuzzy rules. We can even combine multiple sensors or multiple data into new virtual data nodes by adding AI algorithms and creating much more intelligent data. And we also use AI in order to detect anomalies in sensor data. Typically, we do that for farmers, for example, when we can detect if there is a sensor reporting the soil moisture, for example, and that is suddenly reporting incorrectly due to something.
So basically, I mean, your customers are not only property owners. I mean, when I'm talking about property, it means buildings, but it can be, let's say, agricultural projects. It can be healthcare projects or any other.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, we talk about properties in a much wider perspective than just buildings. It can actually be process owners as well. So look at your if you have an industrial process rather than a property, we can digitalize that as well. One of the benefits, actually, one of the things that is a little bit different maybe with our platform Ugio compared to most others, is that we have a completely standard product that fits all those kind of customers. So there is no customizing of the Ugio platform for those different domains. It's exactly the same thing. The only thing that differs is the processing power and the memory needed to support a multi-million citizen city compared to a single farmer, for example. I'm looking at the watch a little bit. So the central function. The platform comes with a control panel. I think I mentioned that before, which is a web interface. And the core function of that web interface is to manage the infrastructure. That means sensors, manage the sensors, managing actuators, being able to program those scenarios using the rule engine. But it's also about setting up all the users and be able to define access rights for those users. And the same thing with services.
And also, I guess, since your platform is business focused and not for the individuals, your APIs are not public APIs.
Well, the APIs are public, but if you don't have any access rights to things, they're quite useless because you can't see anything anyway. But the APIs are posted, and well, anyone can look at them, see how they work, and so forth. But they cannot, and they can connect to Ugio. We have a public Ugio, so they can connect to Ugio, but they still don't see the data.
Okay.
Or actually, to be honest, I have, because we have a demo set up. So there are quite a few sensors that I can look at that are in Lund, in our city in Lund, both in our office as well as in the city. In the platform, in the control panel, there is also a very simplistic visualization tool that you can see to the right here. And this is an example of, it's a real estate company. that have a number of apartment buildings. And typically when he starts using this tool, he uses the map, OpenStreetMaps, and there are icons showing the different buildings that are connected. And in this tool, he can then simply just click on a building, and then he goes into the building where we have a picture of the building. It could be a 2D picture like this one, or something else, a photo or whatever. This localization manager that we call in the control panel is extremely agnostic. So it doesn't really matter. You could be a golf course, or you can be a city, or you can be a farmer. It still works very well. We call it my first digitalization, because it's not really intended to be a very advanced application, but it's intended to be where you start your digitalization journey to just get started, and after that you should utilize the third-party ecosystem of providers. You could actually, instead of having a picture of the building, you could instead have a picture of the process. In this case, it's a heating ventilation picture, and you have dragged and dropped the different sensors and actuators here into the picture so that you can get a good monitorization of your heating ventilation system instead. And since this is using just pictures, it's so easy to digitalize basically any type of property. But again, it only leads to a certain amount of advanced services. Then after that, you need to have much more specific service. And that's the whole point, because what we are trying to do is to lead our customers into defining an architecture that really works long term for him, and then start small, develop not only applications but also develop the own organization to become data driven, and then step by step upgrade with new functions. Sometimes you do it using just a control panel and our location manager, and sometimes you start adding applications from third-party vendors instead. And we have done, I don't know how many, 50 different applications so far. Most customers, or most of those use cases that you see on this list, we have done with just our own web application, the control panel and the location manager. Some of those use cases have required a specific third-party service.
So I guess all of them are business scale projects. Like, I mean, what is the range for these kind of projects, in terms of number of sensors or in terms of cost also?
Well, first of all, I think we should be fair and say that even for business to business, municipalities, utility companies, and so forth, everyone is just in the beginning of their digitalization journey. So it's not that customers have 100,000 of sensors. It's more that they do an application, 100 sensors, they do another application, 1,000 sensors, but it's still not rolled out on a huge volume scale. But it's coming. We see it coming. We have customers right now that are planning for 50,000 sensors, 100,000 sensors for different applications.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Another thing that we talk a lot about is how to introduce this kind of platform when you already have buildings with vertical suppliers of the digital functions. There is a very good response to that, and that is the fact that most of those vertical service providers have APIs that are used. Remember this spaghetti integration that we talked about before? We can actually utilize those APIs and connect to our platform instead, and then being able to visualize the data from those verticals, but also to start sending reference data or control data, steering data to those verticals, like wanted room temperature or on/off on lights and so forth. So there is a possibility, quite easy actually, to step by step move from the very vertical setup over into more horizontal setup where the property owner can take his own responsibility. It's easy otherwise to believe that it's a huge step to start moving, but it's not. It's a step by step. SDK. I talk a lot about third-party applications, and I talk a lot about the possibility to connect loads of different numbers of sensors. That's not happening just like that. So we are putting in a lot of effort to develop tools for both service developers, application developers, and for providers or suppliers of sensors and actuators. So the web applications that we have done that we call Control Panel and Localization Manager, we are right now putting together a library of components that we have used to develop our own applications that will be available for developers to build their own applications using those components or just looking at the code and copy paste in order to very quickly developing their own services to connect to Yggo. We're also developing an SDK and an integration framework, so it will become very easy for anyone to develop device drivers if they would like to get support for their own new sensor, or if they are playing around with Arduino and doing their own sensors in the university. They should also be able to just spend a couple of hours to develop their own driver so that it can be connected to Yggo and utilized in Yggo. All of this is still in the works and will be released during summer and beginning of fall.
Mm-hmm. So those components that you mentioned, those components are directed to the developers or end users, like end users can drag and drop those components and create their own applications?
It's actually both. The main focus is for developers of applications or services to be able to quickly develop their services or to modify the service so it can be connected to Yggo. Mm-hmm. Or same way if for sensor providers to be able to write their own device drivers for their sensors. But we should also see it as a possibility for our customers, like for example a real estate company that has their own IT department. Mm-hmm. They should be able to write their own applications on top of platform or write their own device driver for their favorite humidity sensor.
Yeah.
Just a couple of different customers we have. Via Syd, that's the water operator in south of Sweden. So they're one of those that have decided to go all in with digitalization, and they have in the pipe a couple of 100,000 sensors, water sensors, sensors for manholes and fire hydrants and so forth that will be connected in the next couple of years. And they have decided to use our platform Yggo because they are a provider of critical infrastructure or owner of critical infrastructure. So they want to be in 100% control of their own digitalization. And then our platform is the perfect tool for them to be able to take that control rather than outsourcing. And this is a sensor that I will start providing to all our tenants. City of Stockholm is another customer of ours. We have Stockholm have decided to use our platform for their digitalization. However, this decision has been appealed, so it's not clear yet that we will actually get the order. But Stockholm have decided to become, or have the intention to become, the smartest city in the world by 2040. And they decided that the way to do that is to work with a very, as I say, an IT and IoT infrastructure that is their own. And it's based upon a number of enabling principles that you can see here, 7 different principles. Number 1, the solutions should be built upon common digital platforms. Mm-hmm. And common means common for the city of Stockholm and all different parts of the city of Stockholm, whether it's private enterprises or the region or the city itself. Number 2, there should be data exchange through central platforms, going towards this collaborative smart society, as I talked about before. Mm-hmm. Number 3, technical solutions should be based upon open standards. So being able to connect those different modules by having standards and open standards that is critical. Oops.
Like fireware.
Like fireware, exactly. Number 4, the technical solutions should be modular. Again, trying to avoid that you have large platforms from single suppliers. You should be modular, and you should be able to bring in a new module. You should be able to replace a module if you're not satisfied, because they're based on open standards. Number 5, agreements for development and innovation. This basically means that they would like all suppliers to participate in developing solutions and innovations for the collaborative society. Number 6, you mentioned, that was the first question, right? Security and integrity. Very important, of course, if you want to be the smartest city in the world 2040, you need to be in total control of both security and integrity. And number 7, data should be available both internally and as open data externally. So the intention is twofold, both to work with data for their own purpose in the city, but also to be able to provide data openly to citizens and partners in Stockholm. Mm-hmm. As far as I'm aware, Stockholm is the first city that really tries to create a common setup for their development of a smart city like this. All the other, Barcelona, London, Dublin, or whatever, they have been doing it function by function and then just enforcing the vertical setup. One of the real estate companies that we have been working with is Castellum, and Castellum have been working with digitalization since many years ago, so they're quite experienced in this. And they decided to develop their own platform. You can see it here. They call it as Cassandra. And they took a little bit similar approach as Stockholm. They decided to make a modular platform, which they own the Cassandra, but it consists of different modules with standardized interfaces that Castellum then can decide which are the module providers. And our platform Yggo is one of the modules in Cassandra, and our platform is in Cassandra used as the platform to integrate towards all the sensors and actuators in the system and provide an API to everything else in that platform.
Yeah, I was just wondering why did they name their platform called Cassandra? Because Cassandra, there is also pretty known database management system.
Yeah, it's a good question. So everything is done to confuse the right. I don't know why they choose Cassandra. Oops. That was my computer running wild. So, a practical example of how a collaborative society could work like. This is something that we are trying to establish, where we now try to make a collaboration between the city, multiple energy suppliers, and real estate companies in order to be able to have IGU working for all of those, and making sure that we can have multiple energy suppliers and multiple energy types that are being supplied to a real estate company in an efficient way, meaning that we use the energy that is most efficient in any situation, and meaning that they can be balanced, so that we don't try to use district heating when it's very, very cold, because then district heating will not be able to deliver the whole energy and so forth. So it's really about using IGU as the platform for all those parties to communicate with each other and make their systems collaborate with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Last slide about platform. What we're trying to do, we have set up a collaboration with RISE, Research Institute Sweden. And we have also set up now something that is called the Fireware iHub in our premises in Lund. And the Fireware iHub is all about being a good ambassador for Fireware in Sweden. And we are promoting very much both Sensative and RISE, that we should try to standardize API and standardize data models based upon Fireware, so that we can achieve really a smart collaborative society going forward. Last thing, we are also developing sensors in Sensative, and that's probably a completely different web seminar, but I thought you should just be aware of it. It's LoRaWAN sensors and it's T-Wave sensors.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Thank you. And my time was out.
No, I think it's perfectly okay. And let me see if we have any questions. So I think, yeah, I covered most of the questions, but I basically also had 2 questions by myself. I mean, in the last slide, you mentioned about LoRaWAN, but I guess also for your DIMS management system, you have a different layer of networks between sensors and the cloud, or from cloud to end users applications and so on. So, I mean, can you give some brief overview what type of network technologies you are using?
Yes. We actually started not as a smart city platform, but as a smart property, smart building platform. And then it was all about C-Wave, Zigbee, Wi-Fi, BACnet, Modbus, MBus, a little bit 3G that then became MBIT, and also wired things, Ethernet connected things. So, and then when we start talking about smart city, it's a lot about LoRa. We can connect to Sigfox, and we can connect to NB-IoT and CAT-M. So the whole point is, I also saw my slide there going from spaghetti to lasagna. So being able to connect with all the legacy protocols is very, very important for customers. So we try to be agnostic to protocols.
And then I have another question. Then I will go a couple of questions we have on the Discord. Yeah. But I mean, you were talking about small to medium scale IoT projects or applications that you'd already developed, like more than 50 plus names that you showed. But then, I mean, we did not also discuss how you power your projects, or how do you run your sensors for those applications. Because different sensors have different power requirements. Some of them you might run with low power, some of them not. So, I mean, how do you decide, or what have been used in your system, in your projects?
So typically, when we work with customers, we jointly work to define which sensors should be used. And since Ugio, since our platform, we can connect to any sensor, not only LoRa sensors, but other sensors as well. We have the benefit of being able to look at the use case and define what is the most important factors for the different sensors for the use case. And instead of saying, okay, we need to look at LoRa sensors, we need to look at NB-IoT sensors, we try to find the sensor that is most suitable and then connect it.
So you are using the battery or any other external power source?
Both.
Okay. And then there's I think there is a question about the projects, or the example of the projects that you provided perhaps are not too big for you. So what the question was, what is the smallest that could run in Ugio? Is I'm saying Ugio?
It's extremely difficult, especially for English people to to pronounce it. But it's Ugio, after the tree of life in the Nordic mythology, and that tree of life was called Yggdrasil.
So what is the smallest project that could run in your platform, and how does the payment model look like?
The smallest commercial thing we have done, I think, are connected golf courses. The greens are connected to know the soil moisture level and so forth, to be able to optimize the greens. The business model is based upon a small fee for setting up the system and then a monthly fee. The monthly fee, there is a base fee that is, as I say, per month fixed, and then there is a fee per API connection points. So if you have one user connecting to 10 sensors, that's then 10 connection points. If you have two users connecting to 20, it's 40 connection points. So in practice, that means that the cost is very reasonable from start, and then it scales with the number of value that you get from the platform.
And then there was another question about open data. So is there any support around this in Yogi today? And a way for the municipalities to publish its data. So he gave an example, dataportal.ac.
We are collaborating, and we're actually being the reseller of an open data platform from Holland named Sensative. And Sensative has been used, for example, in the project in Stockholm named ÖDIS, Open Data i Storstockholm. Since Sensative platform is also based upon FireWire, it becomes a very, how to say, consistent platform solution to use Ugio and the Sensative platform together, because it's the same API and the same data models.
And then there is a general questions regarding, since you have listed a number of projects, which challenge would you consider the most difficult to overcome in a typical IoT project?
I would say organization. Because what we're doing, most of our customers have been outsourcing the digital functions to specialist companies. With our platform, we empower the property owners, but that also puts requirements on the property owner to be able to take that ownership, to take that responsibility. So it's also an organizational question. and that is more difficult, I think, because, well, the platform from a technical point of view has been in the market now for 3 years, so it's pretty mature. While for every customer, it's a new journey.
Yeah. So you're talking about more from the management perspective.
Management, competence, new roles, things like this. Also, to be honest, many customers are also organized in a more vertical setup. Someone is responsible for access systems, someone else is responsible for waste management and so forth. And now we come with a platform, and that platform puts together all the digitalization into one system.
So you mentioned also you are operating in Sweden and Netherlands, right? So are you operating also somewhere else in terms of projects?
Corona has limited our possibilities a little bit, but we are collaborating. We're setting up right now projects and collaborations both in North America and multiple countries in Europe.
I just received one question, then I lost it. No, I think I covered them all.
Super.
If there are no more questions, then I would like to thank you again, Mats, for joining us.
My pleasure.
It was a new information for us, and we were not aware that you were doing this much of work on IoT and working towards smart and collaborative city or society.
Maybe we should also mention, Francis, that the Linné Universitetet, how do you say that in English? University of Linné?
Yeah, Linné's University, yeah.
Okay. We have set up a partnership, and together we will digitalize a ship, right?
Yes, I think together with Fredrik, I guess you have this project. And it would be better if Fredrik could join us. But yes, I think that's also an interesting project that's going on. And with these words, I want to wish everyone a nice evening. And I hope to see you soon, Mats, in near future for our course, and as you said, for the projects that we are running on the ship. And thank you again for giving us your experience and insights on IoT technologies.
Thank you. And for everyone out there listening, thank you for joining, and good luck with your IoT. Take care.